Okay, let's finish up this program now with a discussion on courageous self-leadership. And again, that goes back to what Harold was talking about in his opening comments about looking deep inside yourself and seeing, have you become complacent? Can you change yourself? Can you be better as a team member and better as a team leader? That all goes back to courageous self-leadership. The success and safety that you enjoy is not through luck. It's not written in the stars. It's not destiny. Personal and professional success to a significant degree flows from courageous self-leadership. I hear all the time when I interview with the press and they hear my life story, and I'll tell you here in a moment how I turned out to be an astronaut, but when they hear that story, I look at the paper the next morning, the first sentence will read, "It was destiny that Mike Mullane would be an astronaut." No! No! Destiny has nothing to do with personal and professional success. It's not written in the stars. Flows through courageous self-leadership. I'll prove to you that it wasn't destiny that made Mike Mullane an astronaut. This is what destiny had to work with right here. Teenage Mike Mullane. Trust me, you would not have wanted him knocking on your doors and dating your daughters. That put the fear of God in you. A lot of people assume if I'm an astronaut now, destiny had genius to work with. Gosh, I have to have been a gifted genius child if I'm an astronaut now. Well, let's investigate that. Here's my high school yearbook photo. Down in ambition it says to attend the Air Force Academy. I couldn't get into the Air Force Academy. My grades weren't good enough. West Point took me, which frankly doesn't say a lot about West Point. But in all fairness to West Point, I was a third alternate for my congressional district. I barely made it into West Point, and at graduation West Point, I wasn't on the stage getting awards for academic excellence. Destiny did not have genius to work with. Let me show you a few other things that destiny struggled with. This is the varsity club in my high school, the star athletes in my high school. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not in this picture. Destiny didn't have athleticism to work with. See this lady? This is the homecoming queen. I didn't date the homecoming queen. Destiny didn't have good looks to work with. This next slide says it all, what destiny had in teenage Mike Mullane. The autographed pages out of my high school yearbook. It gets worse. It gets worse. I have one autograph, one. And you know what it reads? And I'm as serious as a heart attack. It reads, "You missed Korea, but here's hoping you make Vietnam." That is the only autograph I have in my entire high school yearbook. Destiny did not have popularity to work with. Folks, I am not an astronaut because it was written in the stars, because it was destiny. And you have not led your teams to great success and safety. You, as an individual, have not achieved success and safety because it was destiny, because it was luck, because it was written in the stars. It's because you learned and practiced elements of courageous self-leadership. We all learn these lessons from many different sources. Parents are frequently a great source. Coaches, teachers, scoutmasters, co-workers, bosses. We learn these lessons, we apply them, and from that flows great success. And I learned my lessons, significant lessons, from my parents. My dad was a World War II aviator, met and married my mom when she was 18 in 1943. My dad survived the war, came back to live the American dream with my mom, but then in 1955, at age 33, my dad was crippled for life with polio. Never again walked, spent the rest of his life on crutches and braces and in a wheelchair. And at this time in my parents' lives, they had 6 children to raise. I'm number 2 in the birth order underneath that red arrow there. But you can imagine the horror of waking up one day and realizing the primary breadwinner in a family of 6 kids is now confined for life to a wheelchair at a time in America where impaired people were not highly valued. And this could have gone down real ugly. My father could have committed suicide, could have become a drug addict, my mom could have left him, but none of that happened because my parents were courageous self-leaders, and they reacted to adversity as courageous self-leaders do. They accepted what they could not change. They didn't throw up their hands and say, "I quit," and had some of these bad things happen. They accepted what they could not change, and then to the degree possible, they made a mid-course correction around those obstacles. They stayed laser-focused on their goal. The goal was raising these 6 kids. And they worked around the obstacle as best as they could, hammering away at that goal, raising these 6 kids. And that's all characteristic of self-leadership, how you respond to adversity. I was only 9 years old when this was happening. I had no idea I was being imprinted with these lessons, but I can see now as an adult how I was imprinted with them and how they played out in turning me into an astronaut. Let me tell you that story. Early in my life, I wanted to fly as far back as I could remember. Here's a picture of me when I was about 4 years old, looking at a book about jet planes. There were no astronauts when I was this young, but there were jets. I wanted to go up and fly them. As I did grow up, an amazing event happened in world history. October 4th, 1957, 50 years ago, what happened? Sputnik. The space race started. I was 12 years old. I was reborn on that date. I became a child of the space race, fell in love with everything associated with space, with rockets, with astronomy. I was growing up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and could indulge my interest in homemade rockets from the vast desert right outside my home door. And I was setting a goal, even this young, of someday riding a rocket into space, of being an astronaut. This is the first mark of self-leadership. We challenge ourselves in the extreme. We set very lofty goals for ourselves. There's a huge population that is here in their personal and professional lives, and now they're going to challenge themselves, and what do? They take a tiny little baby step. Why do they do that? They're safe. They know they can get here. Courageous self-leaders never do that. We know we can get here. What we don't know is, can we get out here? But we're going to find out. We're going to find out. We're going to reach deep down and see what we're capable of. It's really sad, the waste of potential in this world. These people behind us will go to their graves never knowing what they were truly capable of because they never challenged themselves. You can never know what you're capable of unless you challenge yourself. Think of it this way. We test military aviation, military planes, jets, to find the edge of their performance envelope. How high can they fly? How fast? How many G's they can pull? We all, individually, personally and professionally, have a performance envelope. But I'll tell you right now, it's a lot further out there than any of us think. Any of us, myself included. That performance envelope is way out there. And the way we find it is by taking these big steps, these big challenges, reaching down, saying, hey, I can lead my team to a higher standard of safety. I can be safe. I can be a self-leader and influence the people around me to be self-leaders and make this team safer. I can do these things because I am a courageous self-leader. That is the first mark of self-leadership, is challenging yourself to ever higher and higher goals. And I certainly was doing that, as challenging myself to grow up and be an astronaut someday. As I said, I was testing these homemade rockets from the nearby deserts. Rockets? Not really. These things were pipe bombs with fins. It's amazing I didn't blow myself to hell and back with these things. Sometimes I needed a wind tunnel. I didn't have it, so I used my dad's car as a wind tunnel. If I saw this today, I'd dial 911. Sometimes I tested these things to the roof of my parents' house. A real dumb idea. The neighbors were sure happy to see me leave, and the fire department, I'm sure. Here I am setting up one of my creations for launch. Here I am legging it out after lighting a fuse. There's ignition, and there's detonation. I hear all the time, people hear I flew combat in Vietnam, flew 3 times on the space shuttle, and they say, wow, look at all that danger you lived in your life. Trust me, the most dangerous period of any male's life isn't whatever they do as an adult male. It's when they're a teenage boy. Because when you're a teenage boy, you don't have a brain in your head. And there's proof of it right there. Here's one of my successful launches. Here's one of my rockets parachuting back to the desert. Here I am recovering one of those rockets. I want to re-show this video. Note the young woman, about 18, 19 years old, walking off the screen to the right there. That is now my wife of 40 years. There's a woman who will never be able to say, I didn't know what I was getting into. Not when I have video like that. As you heard, I went to West Point, graduated West Point in 1967, went into the Air Force to be a pilot, test pilot, astronaut. Could not be a pilot because my eyes were bad. Ended up flying in the back seat of the F-4 Phantom, as I told you. Well, guess what? In 1967, if you couldn't be a pilot, you couldn't be an astronaut. End of dream, or so it would appear. But I can see I reacted to this news in a way that's characteristic of courageous self-leaders. I didn't throw up my hands and said, I quit. I had a goal. That goal was flying. My mid-course correction was, hey, if I can't fly in the front seat of the airplane, I'll fly as a goose in the back seat. If I can't be an astronaut, I'm going to get as close as I can. I'll work in mission control as a flight director, possibly. That's all characteristic of self-leaders, and that is encountering obstacles, and they're always there. Nobody ever has a straight shot for any personal, professional goal. There's always obstacles. Do you throw up your hands and say, I quit, or you navigate around them as best as possible, stay laser-focused on the goal, and continue? 2 other things I was doing as an astronaut, as an Air Force goose. I'll tell you how I ended up being an astronaut in a second, but 2 other things I was doing that are critical aspects of self-leadership. One is I went back to school and advanced my education, got a master's degree. Courageous self-leaders are never happy with their education. I'm not necessarily talking about formally advancing your education. I'm talking about an attitude, an open mind. I don't know everything, but I want to know everything. So you listen to other people. You'll go to company training or firefighting training opportunities. You'll read. You're sponges. Basically, you're always constantly trying to better yourself. Another thing we do is our best at everything. We pour heart and soul in the task at hand. We don't rationalize, when's this ever going to count? It always counts. Everything you're doing, everything you have ever done is going to count in your futures. So we constantly do our best at everything. For me, all of these characteristics came into play in a way I could not have imagined in 1967. 10 years later, 1977, the obstacle's removed. NASA changes the rules and says to be a mission specialist astronaut on the space shuttle, you don't have to be a pilot. Mission specialists are people that use a robot arm, do experiments, lift up satellites, things like that. You don't have to be a pilot to be a mission specialist. So all of a sudden that dream was back in front of me. I filled out an application. I sent it to NASA, and I was selecting the first group of shuttle astronauts 10 years after I thought that dream was over. Now let's summarize in text. And by the way, make sure you take this message back to your children on that do your best. For 10 years, I did my best as a goose, as an engineer, thinking it was never going to count toward being an astronaut because of my bad eyesight. It turned out it all counted. So all the children that you deal with, make sure they understand that. Everything they're doing in their life is going to count in their futures, just as it does for all of us. Okay, let's summarize in text here what we learned about self-leadership. How did it happen that a child with a goal of someday riding a rocket into space is 25 years later riding a rocket similar to this, passing 200 miles over that exact spot in the desert? Here's Albuquerque seen from space. How did that happen? It wasn't luck. It wasn't destiny. It happened because I learned these lessons in self-leadership and practice them. Self-leaders challenge themselves in the extreme, set very lofty goals. We accept those things we cannot change. We don't get bogged down or throw up our hands and say, I quit. We make mid-course corrections around the obstacles. We stay laser-focused on the goal. We constantly advance our education, and we constantly do our best. If I could distill into 2 sentences the philosophy of life by which courageous self-leaders live their lives, it's these 2 sentences right here. Success isn't some mythical final destination. It is a continuous life journey of challenging ourselves to ever higher and higher goals, searching for that edge of our performance envelopes as team leaders, as team members, parents, spouses, whatever. No courageous self-leader ever crosses the goal line, spikes the ball, says, game over, I won. Oh, we'll celebrate an accomplishment, but relatively quickly, we're going to say, hold it, I don't want to be here. I can lead this team to be safer. I can take them out here. I can lead myself to be safer and better. I can take myself out here. That's how it's done, finding that performance envelope. And I hope I just preached to the choir here. I hope you just all saw yourself in those characteristics. But please practice great self-leadership. Guard against that normalization of deviance. Leaders empower people. Don't allow them to slip into that passenger mode. And everybody remember, you count. Never fall into the passenger mode. Put your ideas, your concerns out there for the team and the leadership to consider. And when you do these things, you will take your teams to the highest achievable orbits of success and safety, as certainly as this rocket is taking her crew to new orbits. And I wish you Godspeed on that journey. Be safe. Bye-bye.